Hey, how you doing? David Taub here with Epic Guitar Instruction. Thanks so much for tuning into this lesson on chord changing techniques and principles. We're really going to get your chord changing super proficient, and you're going to be moving through your changes, getting them on autopilot faster than ever. So we're going to start the lesson off with your fret hand. You're going to learn 6 critical tips for proper fret hand technique. You know, if you're struggling with your chord changes, and it is frustrating, I feel you. I totally know, when you're trying to get from one chord to the next and you just can't hit it right, you can't make that change, it messes up the strum, and it just makes your musical journey so much more challenging. Well, I've taught hundreds of thousands of students all over the world, and often students are not using the proper fret hand technique. If that is not proper, you're going to have trouble with your chord changing and trouble with your techniques. After that, it just kind of multiplies down the line. So we're going to start this lesson off with, and you're going to learn 6 critical techniques for proper fret hand technique. And then from tightening up your fret hand technique, we're going to move to 5 critical chord changing techniques that are absolute must-knows that you're going to need to know to make your chord changing the most proficient and the fastest, and it's really going to help you move along your changing. If you're not doing these 5 things, it's just going to make your guitar journey so much harder. We try to make things easier here. We try to get you playing in the fastest, most efficient manner. I'm going to give you lots of exercises along the way, and you're going to find those 5 principles to be very enlightening. And then I'm going to get into some exercises and some ways to practice your chord changing and some progression exercise that you're really going to like. It's really going to challenge you, and it's really going to push you to the next level, because that's how you're going to get better on guitar. Not by practicing the same chords that you already know or a same strum pattern. You're going to get better by going off into that uncharted waters to push yourself to the next level, right? You're going to you want to take on harder chords, harder chord changes, harder strum patterns, and harder songs, right? Continually pushing yourself, that's what's going to get you to the next level, and we'll help you get there. So we're going to have a great time in the lesson today. So for the first part, let's zoom in on a tight shot, because you really need to look at these principles and techniques up close. Okay, we're here on a tight shot, so you could see this fret hand principles, techniques up close as we learn 6 tips to your proper fret hand technique. And for these examples, we'll use this E minor chord and a suspended second. So we could talk about these chord changing techniques, okay? So basically, first tip is, remember, always your fingers are as close to the strings as possible, always. Not out here. Not even when I play E minor and I'm not even using these 2 fingers. Notice the 2 fingers are in close. Everything is as close to the fretboard as possible. No matter what chord I'm playing, whether it be D, E. Notice how close my fingers are, G, to the strings at all times. Okay? You want to keep in that position. A lot about chord changing, like I said, is about this fret hand technique and having these principles down to make your chord changing easier. Fingers close at all times. Second thing, get on your fingertips. It will really help you to get your chords sounding better and to get your chord changing more proficient. Too many students are trying to finger chords like this, and they lay their hand down on the fretboard, as you could see, right? That's just going to make things harder. Get on your tips of your fingers, wrist down and out, okay? Not up here. You're not gripping the guitar like a baseball bat with your thumb way, way over the top, okay? Wrist is down on your fingertips. You can practice getting your chords to sound good on your fingertips. All notes ring true. Next thing, never take this hand apart. When you're changing chords or playing chords, never go E minor and then you go to A sus2 and you take your hand apart only to put it right back together. Right? Don't go from D and then you're going to go to a G chord, your hand comes apart, and then okay, G, G. Right? You want to leave your hand in that tight, what I call it, cluster. Notice my hand as I go through these chords. No matter what the chord is, I'm not taking it apart. Okay? Also, don't come off the fretboard this way. Right? We're not going this way to change chords. It's more of a sliding on the strings. Right? I'm not doing this and coming off and coming apart. You keep that hand together. Right? in tight on your fingertips, fingers close to the strings, always. Fourth tip, keep that pinky tight against the third finger. That might take some work. Too many players, it's out here or down here. And that's just going to make it impossible when you go to another chord. You're going to have to move it too far. It makes it really much more difficult. Notice on D, look where my pinky is, right? E minor, going to that A suspended second, right? Look how I execute that change on my fingertips. This will help you later in your journey, having that pinky in tight, especially when you get to bar chords. Pinky stays tight on E, A minor, even C major. Look how my hand's in that cluster. Look how I can make these changes so easy with so minimal movements. That's what you want. And that pinky stays in nice and tight. The fifth tip is, again, the wrist position. You got to keep this down. Once you start coming up too far with the wrist, you're going to get into trouble. It's going to flatten out your fingers and keep you from being on your fingertips. Wrist down. Keep your thumb, in a position where it's just going to be able to slightly go over the top of the neck to mute the low E or the A string if needed, but keep it like maybe about even with the first or second finger, not way over here and definitely not over like this. Remember, the wrist stays down while you're practicing these. You can take all your changes, just go through them with one hit each, and really work on these fret hand techniques. The thumb, that's our sixth tip. 6 tips. Number 6, keep that thumb on top a little bit over to help mute, like for instance, on all A, B, C, and D type chords. A minor, B 7th, if you're up to a B 7th chord, right? We're using that low, muting that low E string with our thumb, because when we're strumming, we're gonna hit that low E string, we wanna mute it. So A minor, like an A minor chord, our thumb is just coming over the top, just enough to mute it. And it doesn't press down too hard or you're gonna fret that note. Just mute it, just enough to mute it. Yes, it does pick our wrist up a little bit, but sometimes you gotta bend the rules with guitar to get the job done. So on our A minor chord, on our A major chord, on our B7 chord, right, we're muting with our thumb. On our C chord, on our D chord, D minor chord, right? So this will help us because we're gonna hit all the strings, but I don't hear the low E because it's muted. I'm hitting it, but it's muted. Notice the thumb position. Those are our 6 tips. Practice those. Get the foundation solid that we're building on. All right, we're in for a tight shot again for our 5 chord changing principles that are absolute musts for getting your chord changing smooth and to the next level. All right, let's use a G chord for this example and a C add 9. Okay, the first principle that we use is the concept of shared fingers, and that means a lot of these chords are going to share notes. For instance, when I play the G chord shares notes, the G note and the D note on the high E and B strings using the 4th and 3rd finger. So obviously, when I play G, now when I go to C add 9, I'm not going to pick those fingers up only to reattach them back to the same strings. We're going to leave them down. See, the chords share these fingers. Now that's a very subtle thing. Not so subtle G, C add 9, but let's say C to A minor. Here's our C chord again. Notice how tight our 3rd finger is to our 4th finger, right? We're muting the low E string with our thumb. Now let's say I go to A minor. I'm not going to take off my hand to put it back together, especially since this 1st finger is going to stay on that C note. See, it shares that note, and also we share our 2nd finger on the E note. So why take your fingers off only to put them right back exactly where they are? That's called shared fingers. So to do C to A minor, I'm just going to get my pinky out of the way just so you can see it better. So when I go C to A minor, I just move one finger. That's it. These 2 fingers are shared, And you'll find out with so many changes, shares fingers. And you'll get to know them, right? So there's the change. So practice that back and forth. C, A minor. G to E minor shares the B note. Look at that first finger. It doesn't have to move off the string. You might have to shimmy it down a little bit, but it stays on that string. Don't take your fingers off the strings if you don't have to. G, E minor. Very, very important. Shared fingers. And you'll find those through tons of chord changes, and you could check the ebook for more practice on those, but shared fingers. The next principle for good chord changing is the idea of clustering. Leaving our hand, and I alluded to this earlier in the lesson, in this same cluster. Don't take it apart just to put it back together in a same configuration. For instance, when we go from E minor to A suspended second, notice the hand really doesn't leave this cluster, this position. I'm not doing E minor and then when I go to take it apart and then A sus2, there it is, A sus2, right? It stays in that cluster. E minor, A sus2. Look how those fingers are tight. Hardly any movement. We keep our movements as minimal as possible. Right? Let's say I'm changing from an E to an A minor. It's the same exact cluster, except we have to drop everything down one string. There's our A minor, right? So I'm not going to go play E, take my hand apart just to put it back in the same position. It's just E, drop down, A minor. Again, look how tight that is. Keep that pinky in tight. The third principle of good chord changing techniques is the principle of slides. And what I mean by that is, let's say if we're playing from an A chord to a D chord. Notice the subtle move I did there where I slid my third finger over from the second fret to the third fret. See that motion? Now you're going to find lots of changes, just like have shared fingers, lots of changes have clusters, lots of changes have these slides. And I have examples of tons of each of them in the ebook, so make sure you download that and you go through those practice exercises. But you can just go from your A chord, watch the slide, slide into that D chord, slide back. Again, it helps me to leave my fingers down, right, in that cluster, but why take it off? I'm just sliding right on the strings. Really makes things easier for your changing. The fourth principle is you always want to keep your fingers as close to the fretboard, to the strings as possible. Notice when you're practicing your exercises, when you're practicing your changes, keep those fingers as tight to the fretboard as you can. Notice I'm almost sliding them on the strings. I'm not coming off this way, right? Coming off this way. If anything, we're moving vertically up and down or sliding across, but we're not coming out with our hand like that. That's a no-no. Because as soon as you do that, your hand will come apart and you have to put it right back and you're going to not make the change in time. So practice C to D. Keep those fingers as close as you can to that fretboard. Go to G. Right, E minor and G. Okay? Pretend they're like magnetically attracted to the strings. Another thing you want to do with your changes is you want to move all your fingers at once, not one at a time. For instance, if I'm going from D to a G, I don't want to go D and then G. Let's see, I got to put my pinky here. I got to move this finger up here and my second finger up there. G. No. You got to practice kind of, even if it's slow, moving them all together. And that will come with time, but not one at a time. That will really slow you down. And this will come when you get the muscle memory going. Just practice back and forth, moving all those fingers together. Let's say you go E to D. Those are good movements. Notice keeping the hand in the cluster. The pinky is tight. Just go back and forth, just like we talked about in the past. Moving all those fingers at once. Even if it's a miss, you miss the chord. I'd rather have you miss it moving all at once than going one at a time. Because eventually you'll get the accuracy down and you'll get it. So that's our 5th chord changing principle. Moving all your fingers at once, not one at a time. Make sure you work on all 5 of these together. It'll take some time, but chip away at it a little bit each day. Now that we've gone over the 6 critical tips for fret hand technique and your 5 chord changing principles, along the way I've given you lots of 2 chord changes back and forth, and you could check the ebook for even more. And that's how you want to approach chord changing as far as practicing. You want to practice a change back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you want to get that muscle memory down. You want to get it to where it's on autopilot, like D to G, D, G, D. I'm using shared fingers. I'm using clusters, D, G, back and forth. Then take it with a strum pattern. Just those 2 chords, right? Back and forth. At first, you might be more like, see, I missed it, right? But at least you went for it, you tried it, and you'll see that soon, the more and more you practice it, instead of hitting it maybe 30% of the time, you'll hit it 45% of the time. And a couple days later, you'll be getting it 60% of the time, and it goes on from there. Write down the changes that you're really struggling with. Maybe you're trying some songs, right? You're visiting our YouTube channel, which is called Epic Guitar Instruction, and we have practice songs there where you could use songs as vehicles to practice your chord changing, practice your rhythm, practice your strumming. If you come across some changes that are troubling, they're challenging you, write them in your practice log. Practice those back and forth, 5 minutes every day. You should be spending 5 to 10 minutes a day practicing your chord changing, back and forth, practicing your tougher chord changes, right? And you can pull those from songs, pull those from your exercises, pull those from your progressions, back and forth. And you don't have to be like totally concentrating on guitar. You could be sitting in front of the TV, right? Just working on it, because so much of it is just getting that muscle memory down, getting this fret hand on autopilot so you can play and not even have to think about the changes. See, I'm sending those messages down to my fingers right as I'm talking to you to change chords as I'm strumming, but it's kind of buried in my subconscious, right? I'm on what I call autopilot. And that might seem light years away, but believe me, it's not. So that's not any voodoo magic I'm doing there, right? It's not any crazy thing. It just takes that muscle memory. And it might seem what I did there light years from where you're at now, because you have to look at your hand and look at the chords and make a conscious effort. But believe me, it gets easier and easier with time. And if you follow these principles, guidelines, fundamentals, techniques, you'll see your playing skyrocket. So you could be sitting there watching TV or hanging out, and if you have a few minutes during the day, grab the guitar and work on your chord changes. Everybody has these little pockets of time. So you don't have to sit down for an hour. You have 5 minutes before you're leaving for work. You have 10 minutes before you have to put the kids to bed. You have 10 minutes before you're going to school. You have 5 minutes before your dinner's ready. You have 10 minutes before dinner and dessert. Grab your guitar. Leave your guitar out on a stand where you can grab it quickly. Don't put it in a case under the bed in a closet. Leave it out. Grab it. Go over your chord changes. Those little pockets of time you'll see are invaluable. They'll really move you along. So now we're going to get into a really cool exercise. And this exercise might take you weeks, months to master, but it's really going to push it to the next level. I'm really going to challenge you. I'm going to give you what I call a long progression of chords. I'm talking 20 changes. Look at all these changes we're going to do here, right? It's a lot. But I'll tell you, if you can master things like this, exercises, changes like this, where there's 20 changes, it makes playing songs. Most songs are what? 3, 4, 5 the same chords. It'll make that like butter, like a piece of cake. Easy, no problem. Master this, push yourself, harder things. This is tough. If it takes you weeks, don't worry about it. Chip away a little each day, 5 to 10 minutes, like we talked about, right? Write this change, this progression down in your practice logs. When you try it, circle the ones you're having difficulty with. Those are the ones you're going to nail back and forth during your 5 to 10 minutes of practice every day. This is also a great warm-up exercise that you can do. We're going to use all open chords for this. A couple of the chords you might not be familiar with. Let me show you those. Like we'll use an F major 7. Don't know if you're playing your F chord yet. If you're not, no problem. You don't need an F bar chord. That might be one of the harder chords you're trying, but you could sub this F major 7 for songs with F chords for now. We're going to use that in this progression. So you might not know that one. We'll use a C add 9. You don't know that one, there it is. Right, I'm writing these out on the screen too. A suspended second. Right, these are also listed in the ebook. You want to, refer to that also. And with all these chords, as you're practicing them and your chord changes, of course, you want to make sure you get the chords to ring true, right? And you want to hear all the notes in the chord. So basically, the progression, I'll just go through the chords so you could see them listed out here. We're going to go E minor, A sus2, to a D chord, all open chords, G chord, C add 9, back to D, A minor, to C, back to A minor, to E, to an A, to a D minor, to a G, to a C, to an F major 7th, to A minor, to D minor, C add 9, G, and then back to E minor. Right? You could do it. And through that change, you're going to look for your shared fingers and your clusters. You're going to leave your hand tight, all the things that we've been working on. For instance, in there is a change that goes from the C to this F major 7th. Right? It kind of looks like the same chord, just drop everything down a string pretty much. Right? You want to look for things like that. For instance, like, we'll pick another one, like going from that A to that D minor, that shares that A note on the G string. Leave it down. Okay? These are the things you look for. And at first, just practice just ringing those chords out once, just so you can kind of get the hang of the sound. Then you could do it with like an easy down, 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 down strum. Pick an easy strum at first. You don't want to be a complex worrying about the strum as you're trying to go through all these changes. It's a chord changing exercise mainly, not a strumming exercise. It could be a strumming exercise if once you get the changes down, then try it with different strum patterns. Like maybe down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. Whatever pattern you're going to use, just strum very slow. Remember, the faster you're strumming, the faster you're going to have to change chords. Really working your chord changing here, so nice and slow. So we'll just use that pattern. I'm going to give you the example and play it for you. Down, down, up, down, 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 up, down. A very eighth note feel. That's the pattern. Okay, so let's go through the changes. I'm going to play it for you. You can even play along with me. And we're going to take it with that slow eighth note pattern. And we'll start on the E minor on the 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. A sus2. D. Now shared finger up to G. 2 shared fingers, C add 9. Nice and slow. D. Don't speed up your strum. Nice and slow. Finger to C. Good. Now one finger back to A minor. Cluster up to E. You have to look at your hand, that's fine. A. D minor. G. C. A minor to D minor, C add 9 to G, back to E minor, awesome. Right, so you can see how this is going to help you along in your guitar journey so much. And then try it with different strum patterns, okay? And then when you get really good at this, it's not over. Take all these changes that are written out, cut them up, write on a piece of paper, cut them up, put each chord in a hat, pick them out one at a time, write that down. So you're basically gonna mix all these up, shoot it out, and you have a totally new long progression. Do that one, right? Get good at that one, mix them up in the hat again, pick them all out, bam, hit them again. These exercises are invaluable. They will really help you along in your guitar journey. So that'll bring this lesson to a close. I hope you enjoy it. Be sure when you're going out throughout these practice exercises, employ those 6 tips for the proper fret hand technique, and then also those 5 chord changing principles that we went over. They're invaluable. Have fun with the long progression. Throw some songs into your practice routine, right? To continue your journey, practicing some songs, building your song catalog, working your rhythm, your timing, your chord changing. Remember that your playing is an evolution. The things I've been going over is, hard work, but you can do it, and we try to make it fun. And remember to stay positive. Remember, your playing is an evolution. Take care. Keep putting those guitars in your hands every day, and keep on rocking. We'll see you in the next lesson.